Alright, let's begin. Let's rock and roll. Got some classic Disney film score music playing in my headphones while I work. Stuff from the Golden Age, like Pinocchio and Snow White. Anyway, I made a little modification here. This was the last shot I discussed. So Golik makes a pronouncement that Asher the priest is an enemy of the kingdom, which is surprising to the prince Vespar, who finds that a little humorous. Now, previously, what happened was he laughed and then he kind of went blank like that right there. I decided that editorially it plays a little better if he makes his comment and then Golik immediately responds with a growl, and then this is actually a reaction. So where that leaves us is with a bit of work to do, because this shot was done in Blender 2.9, and I've kind of made the command decision I don't want to continue this shot in Blender 2.9. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to jump to I think it's 193. Yeah. So let's jump to 193 and go to the end of the image sequence. And like I said, we're going to have a little bit of work to do here, because what I need to do is separate these guys out. There's an easy way and a hard way. The easy way would actually be to jump back into Blender and go ahead and just re-render these guys without their background in there. I'm going to do it the hard way just because why the heck not? So what I'm going to do is drag this in here, just this one standalone image, and then jumping back to my edit. I generally check things against the script and the storyboard as I go. So this last shot of Golik was 193B. It's given the B designation because this shot was essentially added impromptu to the show because I thought it played a little better this way, which means the next shot is probably 194, but again I want to check the storyboard and make sure I'm not getting off kilter here. So let's look at the storyboard. So here's 193, and actually, yeah, what happens is Golik reacts, and then Tobias has some dialogue which we'll begin to deal with today, and asks for permission to speak, at which point the king invites him to do so. He says something, and it's basically in defense of Asher. You know, hey, Asher's the voice of the people. How can the king rule with wisdom if he doesn't listen to the people? And on it goes from there, where essentially Golik has to sort of counter that argument, which he does by dismissing it. Well, I'm sure, Your Highness, we have more pressing matters to deal with than Asher. The reality is, even though he's dismissive about it, the truth is the last thing he wants to do is get into a discussion that might cast aspersions on himself. So what does that mean in practice? It means that what we need to do is we've got a 193B, we need a 193C. Right in between these two. I'm not going to go ahead and put it into the storyboard. As long as it's in the edit, we're good. We'll get that shot done, and then we can jump back to this one and go from there. So that's where we are at today. Boom. So we're going to go back to Krita and immediately save this as 193B. And what I'm going to do is go Scenes. I'm going to go ahead and create a folder. So, new folder, and we'll call this 193 dash. Did I say B? I meant C. B was the Golik shot. Yeah. Okay, and then we'll pack this in here. We'll just call it 193 dash C. Krita. It's not going to be a ping. Okay, so now the question would become, how are we going to painfully make this work? And it is actually quite tricky. I probably should completely remove the background and replace it with the original shot that was used for the background. Here's why. This is something that if you didn't think about it, you might not even consider. The basic, most difficult thing about repurposing this background, assuming the characters are going to move a little bit. So the background, if I'm going to cut these guys out of the background, then the background needs to be a solid painting. Well, the challenge here is that this part of the background is in fact a gradient, which makes it pretty difficult to replace this seamlessly. There is a way. What you could do is grab a selection right along here and just stretch it wide. Well, let's try that. What the heck? We'll try that just for fun. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's cut the characters out and put them on their own layers. Okay, so I don't need to be super exact about it because anyway you slice it, I'm going to have to clean up their edges anyway. So in Krita, I can just go Control X, Control V, and now Vespar is in his own layer. So Vespar, boom. All right. Step 2 would be to do the same thing again. I'm hitting the S key and using the outline selection tool. So clearly around the edges of the sky background that's closest to the wall is where we're going to have the most trouble in terms of making the patch seamless. So Control X, Control V. That's Tobias, Tobias. And what does that leave us with? Leaves us with this. So again, like I said, if you're going to do what I suggested, probably the easiest way to get there would be to go like this. Grab this, Control C, Control V, and now I don't want to solo that layer. And then what I'm going to do is use the transform tool to actually just stretch this wide. Kind of move it over like this. You know, not too bad. Actually, probably the best way to do this would be, come to think of it, I'm just sort of thinking out loud here. I don't want to stretch it quite that way. Probably the smartest thing to do would be just go like this. All right, no, darn it. Come on. Okay, actually, I guess I need to commit to that and then do it again. So now I'm hitting the Shift key so that I can grab this and move it and basically get it into the zone where it is needed. And then probably the simplest solution here, again, I'm literally thinking out loud, is just turn it down, real transparent, and then let's just erase the areas where it's not quite working. So that would mean, actually I should turn these guys off so I'm not getting sidetracked by them. Now, to be accurate here, in this case, this area here doesn't matter because it will still be covered up by Vespar. The area over here might be more problematic because I expect Tobias to move. So I'm going to just kind of go like that. And okay. So now what we have is we've got the patch, which we bring back up to full opacity and just move it underneath the sky. And yeah, again, you can see this little problem here. So let's do it this way. Let's just hit Control E and marry those together. And then we'll kind of hide the patch a bit by just doing some blurring right here. A little blur here, a little blur there. And that's probably going to be just fine. More blurry is probably better. Actually, I'm going to undo that last bit because it kind of created a little problem with the alpha down here at the bottom. So, all right, and let's go ahead and leave it at that. And then, do we want to patch up some of this in here? It's not going to hurt to do so. So let's put in some rocks. Let's also put in a little bit of sky. Again, we can kind of, I'll just cheat here. I'll kind of just add some blurbs of color so that I can then go in with the blur brush and sort of fake it out. Okay, so now we're back to this brush, and presumably we would want to just put in some shadowing. Just kind of follow this through to the bottom. Frankly, that's probably, whoops. Not going to sweat that too much, just little fixie poo. And here we could probably, actually I think I'm going to go with the slightly less contrasty. Cool, that worked. Alright, and as usual, the rule is save early, save often. Now I hit the tilde key so that I'm no longer soloing these layers. And now you can see the problem with Vespar. Probably we could just hit the E key here. And so this is where you're glad you have some music playing in your headphones, or in the background I should say. It's actually playing out the speakers today. Just because you gotta kill a little time just fiddling. In many circumstances I wouldn't do it this way. I would just re-render the characters out of Blender. The reason I'm not is because I'm just getting started today and I'm like, okay, it's kind of warm-up time. So let's get a few kind of brain-dead steps out of our system first to get the day started, and then we'll get to the business of animating our characters. So once Vespar shows this expression of home, which is pretty much the way I would describe this, then the next step will be to have him look at Tobias. And that's why I say this shot, there's a bit of acting here, because essentially Vespar turns to Tobias like, you know, what the heck? You know, or what do you think kind of thing. And Tobias, who does not really, he has no real authority in the court, but because he's kind of a mentor to the prince, he's still kind of an important guy kind of thing. So so this, yeah, we need to tighten that up as well. And we're just getting rid of all the corruption on the edges of Vespar. Cool beans. Not sure what that line there is, if that's in the background. I think it is, yeah, so we probably should fix that. Alright, Tobias, let's save our work. When in doubt, save early, save often. Looks like I did a better job of cropping around Tobias, but it's hard to tell if you think about it, because obviously the background, most of the background is the same as it was before, so that sort of hides the flaws. But I prefer to have a clean border on Tobias. Boom. Let's zip in a little closer. And we'll just grunt work our way through this, and then we'll be ready to get back to storytelling. Again, frequently always hitting Control S just to save your scene, just to be safe. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and just rotate the canvas to make it a little easier. So, in a moment here, when I'm done, we're going to have to start thinking about the timing of all this. I don't know if you guys can hear the music. I'm going to, because again, it's playing out the speakers, I'm going to turn it down a bit just so there's no chance of it bleeding in here. Because we'd hate to get a copyright strike just because of some music I have playing in the background. Now I hit the 5 key, the number 5, which resets the rotation, and the tilde key, so that now we're back to our shot, and I'm thinking here about Vespar. Okay, one thing we should do here is change the default timing, or frame rate I should say, from 24 to 8. I'm going to leave it at 100 frames for the moment. Okay, why don't we do it this way? Let's just put a dummy layer in here, and we'll redline it. And let's just think for a moment here about what is going to happen. So let's jump back to the timeline, and you can see that we've got this reaction, and then so let me get this. So that went for about quarter to a half a second. So I would say we want to leave Vespar's expression as it is for 1 second. The idea being that you always want to give your shots a little bit of breathing room anyway. Okay, by the way, that was a dumb mistake. That should have been a control insert, not insert, because if you hit insert, it creates a keyframe and deletes everything in the frame, whereas what I wanted to do is create a keyframe but keep what was there. So the next control insert is there, but now let's go up to this paint layer. And so if you think about the timing, so in other words, we have some breathing room here where when we edit it, we might wind up chopping off maybe 4 frames here. Okay. Okay, this is actually a great example of where a little creativity can save you a lot of work, and sometimes the simpler solution turns out to be actually better from a storytelling standpoint. And here's what I'm getting at. Instead of having Vespar turn, let's go over here. What we could do is give ourselves the job of having what is actually in animation, especially if you're doing limited or trying to do somewhat economical animation, the worst case scenario, the worst thing you can have to do is a 3D rotation. So if we say this is Vespar's head, what we're saying is we've got to go from this to something like, let's say, a head turn like this, where his eyes are here, he's looking this way. So getting from this to this, meaning it's got to rotate around in 3D space. Okay, that wasn't supposed to happen, by the way. Right, so this would be Vespar's head after the head turn. And you might adjust his body as well a little bit, but that could probably be done with the Liquify tool. So again, to be clear, this is the situation you actually want to avoid if you're trying to keep things economical. And so you want to ask yourself, well, is there another way that I can tell the story that is just as effective and doesn't require a bunch of extra drawings? And I think there is in this case, at least this first part. Now we may get to Tobias and feel differently about him, but for Vespar, why don't we do kind of the Animate thing where he does a double blink? Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make copies of these 2 keys, and then in between what I'm going to do is essentially just close his eyes and make him blink, because that really is a pretty good mechanism for implying confusion. Okay, so how are you going to do that? Well, his entire eye is in shadow, so let's just do this. Let's just paint the eye out. This is actually going to turn out to be extremely economical, I think. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this, and then I'm hitting the shift key, so I'm going to grab both eyebrows. Okay. And I think I'll do this with Liquify. Just going to stretch those down a little bit. Okay? And then we'll use this big bold brush. And again, my point here is that you'd be surprised how often it turns out that the economical solution is not only more economical, but it actually winds up being better or more funny or whatever from a storytelling standpoint. It's really surprising how often that turns out to be the case. Okay, so now what do? Let's just go to there we go. Let's just see how it plays, and then we'll just make a copy of that. And then that would cause... Okay, I'm thinking make it a little quicker. So we'll take these. I'm hitting the Alt key, and that causes all the keyframes to ripple. We'll just close that up. Blink, blink. Yeah. Okay. And so what's going to happen is you're going to have that little I don't know what the sound is, but it's in an orchestra. It would be like a little percussive instrument that goes blink, blink. You know, when his eyes blink. Okay. So I think you will probably agree with me. This is kind of effective because he's going to go blink, blink, right? And now Tobias is going to react. Now, the thing about it is, the problem that we have, and it's kind of a big one actually, is that Tobias's eyes are completely in shadow. And if they weren't, it would be a lot easier to do what we're trying to do, because then Tobias could just look over. We could just do an eye animation to show him noticing Vespar. So okay, that's not really practical in this case. So in other words, what we're going to do is we probably need to turn Tobias's head. So let's get a keyframe in here first. Okay, so we got our blink, blink, boom, right about there. I'm going to say Tobias would begin to turn. And so now what we're going to do, again, always saving our work. Let's try to cheat this as best we can. Don't know if it's going to work. Probably won't, frankly. But let's see. Okay, if we were going to take Tobias, and we've got to get a little bit of a head turn in there. I'm just going to try it this way. I'm going to hit Control and see what this does. Okay, that's interesting. So it seems to give you a little bit of a 3D. I only started doing this a couple days ago, where using the Liquify tool. Normally, to try to get a head turn, it would normally be something like going like that. And it seems like when you hit Control, for some things, seems to actually work a little better. Okay, so then we'll just jump between. Yeah. So I'm going to go here. And now that I've made that adjustment, let's turn on the onion skin. So what we want to do is basically keep his positioning about the same, but just have that little bit of a head turn. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do the same thing again. And then, of course, we're going to have to patch this up here, fix it up a bit. Let's just see what we have first of all. Yeah, that didn't work. That's what I was afraid of. That did not work. I can't really get enough of a rotation to make this play. You'd have to have something almost like this. So this is just a good practical example of what you might be having to deal with in terms of manipulations. But this is you know, my point entirely is that a 3D head turn is costly. It's costly. It takes time. Okay, so we're not going to do that. So I'm just going to take that back out. We've got to do it the hard way. Okay, so now again, we need to think from the standpoint of storytelling. What you find in anime is that you will often see shots where you have a cutaway to another character, and the whole reason you have the cutaway to another character is so that you don't have to do something that's hard to animate. Okay, so I don't mean to, if you're out there and you're into, you know, classic full 24 frame per second quote unquote Disney style animation, then you might find this a little frustrating, because, you know, we want to see draw this guy and animate him and blah blah blah. And I get that. I get that. But we don't want to do it unless we have to, especially if the alternative actually tells the story better. I would argue in this case, I think we have that exact scenario. What we really should do is have the blink blink, and then let's just say we're going to do 24 frames. Then cut away from here back to the king, and let's let the king have a slight reaction, which we could probably do mostly with a little bit of facial animation and an eye expression. And that is actually better storytelling than having Tobias look at Vespar and be like, because the idea is he glances at Vespar, realizes we've got sort of an awkward moment here, and then he speaks up and says, "Your Highness, if I may speak." Well, what if we cut away to the king raising an eyebrow, and then we hear Tobias say, Your Majesty, if I may speak, and then when we come back to Tobias, we'll go to the close-up. So that makes our job a little easier. So let me prove out my concept here by cutting this into the show. So this is 193C. So what I do is I hit Control R, and then in Krita, fortunately, it's pretty easy. We just change the locations. We just change the text of the locations for the render, and it creates folders if it needs to. And now let's go back to the edit. And what we're going to do, and by the way, this may backfire because I just thought of this. What may happen here is we're going to have a problem between this and the next shot, because if there's any difference at all in these backgrounds, it's going to flash a little bit on the screen. If that happens, we're going to have to go back to this shot and replace this change of expression. We're going to have to bake this back into the scene that I'm working on right now. I suspect that's what's going to happen. So let's see. Boom. So what we want is 193C. There's B. There's C. There's our render. We want this to be 8 frames a second. And we'll pull it in here and turn off resampling. Resampling causes Vegas, because our actual video timeline is 24 frames a second, but our individual clips of image sequences are to play back at 8 frames a second. So by default, what it's going to do is between each of those 3 frames, it's going to try to interpolate tweens, which, trust me, looks very bad. Yeah, it actually didn't happen with Tobias, it happened with Vespar. Yes, I see. Okay. That's actually kind of easy to fix, I think. Let me double check this. Yes and no. Okay, this is kind of funny. The fix is going to be a real kludge. Let's do it this way. I'm going to go back to my prior location with the image sequence and just drag a copy of this in here as a new layer um, over top of the background. And then I'm going to hit the S key, and you saw where it flashed. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab everything outside of the patch that I need to fix and delete it. And then for this shot, we'll go ahead and I'm actually not going to bake this down. So that should have done the trick. That should have fixed it. So what I did was I just created this copy from the original background image, and it just serves as a patch. So we'll save that and re-render it. Boom. So that should have fixed it. Let's go back here and see if it did. And as you can see, everything's fixed. So, all right, so let's review. So, what? Asher? the priest? Okay. Yeah, and I actually do think that my original instinct about this was probably right. That's a little too long. Huh? Okay, there's still a flash. What is that? Okay, you see that flash right there? That's okay. Yeah, and you can see it around behind Tobias too. So for this shot, I actually think I did my fix kind of sort of in reverse. I think let's redo the patch. Okay, this is crazy. A lot of work down the drain in a sense, but here's how we're going to do it. What I'm going to do, remember the only thing that actually moved in the shot as finally decided upon was Vespar's eyes. So I guess we could just do that. Yeah, problem solved. So it turns out we don't need this background at all. We'll just cover it up with the old one and everything's perfect. So file, save, re-render. So that was a bit of a somewhat laborious way to get to, okay, what are we doing here? I want to get back to the scenes, the storyboard in essence. Boom. Okay, so now I think we've got it working. Okay. And then what we'll do is we're going to cut back to the king. And then we're going to hear Tobias's voice saying, Your Highness. Let me double check my... yes, he says, Asher? The holy man? Okay. So let's just alter this. So, Golik scowls. Vespar looks confused. We're going to change that from confusedly at Tobias to just confused. Yep. And then we hear Tobias off screen. King looks quizzical. And I'm just sticking that in there for completeness so that once I'm, deep into editing another part of the show entirely, I don't forget what I did, upstream. So that gives us this. Now, let me ponder this for a moment. Okay, so we've got this shot of the king and Golik. It seems to me that this shot happened some time ago. Did it? Did we ever have a shot? That's kind of getting close to it. Let's think about this one. Can we... We could... We could modify this shot for sure. So we've got the... And the king kind of raises an eyebrow. And I'm thinking he would actually maybe lift his head a little bit. And then you would hear Tobias say. So we don't really need to have Golek in here, but what we could do is if we're going to use this shot, we could modify the silhouette so that we're actually seeing a profile of Golek. So this is the way I did this. I suppose this is an ear, so he's looking at the king, whereas he really, for the next shot, needs to be looking forward. So that's it. 184 is going to get turned into 193D. Okay? I believe let me look at this too for a moment. Yeah, we're going to keep the wide shot, and he's going to say, "If I may speak, Your Highness." And then we're going to have to cut to a closer shot of Tobias where we do see his eyes. So that's going to be a bit of a jolt, I would say, for the audience. But hopefully, if we at least start with this characterization as originally envisioned, it won't be too much of a jolt. So if we jump to a close-up, that sort of buys us a little bit of latitude. So what actually happens is the king raises an eyebrow. We hear Tobias say, "If I may speak, Your Highness." While he's saying that, we cut back to Tobias and get the end of his line. Then we cut back to the king, and the king nods or says, "By all means, Tobias, speak." And then we cut to the close-up of Tobias. So there's kind of a lot going on here in terms of a lot of shots. But what did I say? Did I say 184? Yes, 184. So let's pull 184 up. I believe I recall working with that. 184E, F, blah, blah, blah. Okay, this is actually 184E. I think that's it. Okay, let's see. All right, let me think about this for a minute. What I'm thinking about is, do we want to use this? Is there any benefit to him? I think not. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Get rid of the dialogue. Move this to here, get rid of that, and now we have our starting point. All right, let's just play with this for a minute. As usual, and by the way, let's go ahead and save this. Again, this is 193D. So we're going to save this as 193D. (193-D). 193-D. Krita. Okay. All right, we'll make this fix really quick. This should be easy. Let's just go with, grab that color and actually just kind of make that. Okay, the caveat here being that Golek's chin really is kind of embedded in the collar thing. So let's just kind of, the audience is not going to remember that that collar was a little different. And then we'll we'll do that. I think that'll work. I'm going to go ahead and use the eraser. Oops, I said erase. To chop that off a little bit. And good to go. So again, save early, save often. Now the question is, what are we going to do with the king? Well, let's give him 1 second. Control insert. And once again, I'm hearing the background music a little louder than I prefer. So again, I don't know if you guys can hear that, but you're not supposed to hear it, so we don't want to let you hear it. Okay. Alright, so this is just kind of an acting question. What would he actually do? Let's say we're gonna give it half a second. And what I'm thinking is I want to basically get a, oh, by the way, I need to hit B key, so I'm using the brush, not the, and then I want to actually slant that in a little bit. And I would say this is the kind of thing I often would do with the Liquify tool, but in this case we'll... Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll tighten this up a bit. And then, yeah, unfortunately the onion skins really only show us the perimeter. They don't show us what's going on inside the drawing very well, so we're going to have to fake this a bit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the old, okay, yeah, we've got that tint, by the way. I'm going to use the old quick and dirty guide. I found this is truly the the animator's best kept secret is just draw a layer where you map out what your what your animation keys are going to be, and then it becomes stupidly simple to go ahead and put them in there. So in this case, we're going to go like this. We're going to go like this. And then what we're going to do is take this shadow color and just erase. Sorry, that's the wrong color there. Boom. So here again we're using the shadow color. So these are just, you know, to me it's like creative ways to just figure out how you're going to tell your story. You know, at the end of the day, that's the only thing that matters is the storytelling. Okay, my eyebrow here is a little thickish compared to what I have in these other keys, so I'm going to go ahead and with the king. Alright, now obviously we got a little bit of patching to do here to just get rid of the noise. But yeah, I'm definitely an economist when it comes to animation. It's stupid to redraw stuff over and over if you don't have to. Mainly because you're never gonna redraw it over and over as well as you're going to make a modification of a drawing that was already acceptable. And by the way, I'm not saying that this one is perfect by any means, because it's not, but yeah, it's in the zone. Okay. Really, dude? That's the color I wanted here. Alright. Now what we need to do is see how his expression morphs. Okay, so now, yeah, he's in his own layer, so that's very, very, very good. What that means is we can take now, we don't need the mouth layer for this shot, so I'm going to go ahead and save this, take the mouth layer out. And what I want to do is I really want to think about his body language here. All right. And it seems to me he's going to do one of two things. Whoops. He's either going to, and by the way, I'm going to go ahead and erase all this. I don't need it there anymore. So he's either going to straighten up, so he's going to go from here to here, or he's going to lean in and actually go down and go forward. Which is better? I really don't know. It seems to me that based on the emotion of the situation, the leaning in is inferior, because the idea is he's a little curious. He's not, say, suspicious type of thing. So now what we want to do, this is an important step. I want to just duplicate this layer. So now I've got a safety copy of the king's eye animation. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bake into this some body language on top of it. So we grab this, and again, let's just look at how the Liquify tool might help us here. That's not bad. Okay. Well, let me hit undo, because I really don't actually want that there. I want that here. So I'm hitting Control, and then I'm gonna. Now this is definitely tricky, because what I need to do is I actually want to turn my onion skins on so I can see it, and let's turn the background off. Yeah. Okay. This is a bit of a delicate operation. Yes. Now remember, for all the tweens, we've got more latitude. Oh, because he's in motion. Let me see. Turn that back on. What if, let's do one more thing here. I'm actually thinking I'm going to take this, go here, and then I'm going to go here, and I'm going to have him glance over at Golek. So to be completely accurate here, I am very much just making this up as I go along and just trying things. Just trying stuff. Okay, maybe. Probably need a little more space, a little more breathing room. Okay, and I'm going to say this is actually a little too slow. Okay, you know, I don't know if it's like the coolest, bestest thing I've ever done, but I think it. The problem is that the king's attitude here. This is a, it's a scene that's pretty full of subtlety. I mean, it's not probably brutally clear to the audience exactly what's going on here emotionally in terms of people's body language and thought, and that's a weakness, obviously, in my storytelling. But having said that, it all goes by in the space of about 3 seconds. So, And actually, I must say too, I'm gonna take this and move this way downstream, and I'm gonna take this and move it here, because I'm actually wondering if the body language thing, now that he's looking at Golek, I'm thinking maybe all he needs to do is the little scowl thing. So if that's the case, then I would just insert a keyframe here so it reveals the sequence underneath, right? Since we've got the two layers, and if everything works, we'll just merge them. Kind of, sort of, maybe. Yeah, I'm thinking. First of all, I'm going to take this key out because I think the his change in expression is too extreme. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is take these three keys and I'm hitting Control and I'm going to drag them up to here, so I can turn this back off and still keep it as a safety backup. Now what happens if... Okay, now what happens if we take these two, grab them, bring them here. It's a little bit much of a move. What if we get that out of there for a moment and just see how it feels without it? I like that. It's funny. You never know what's going to happen. I like that. It's simple. It's clean. It's kind of like, not sure what's going on here, not sure what comes next is sort of the attitude. And that's really what Tobias is responding to. So now, importantly, if we do have to have enough time for Tobias to respond. So again, I can't emphasize enough in terms of the story. This is probably one of the worst little sequences I've bumped into in terms of the way I wrote the script. The acting is pretty subtle. This is again too long. That's why getting away from it for a few minutes is often a good thing, because you get a fresh look after a bit. Yeah, go with that. And then actually, let's do this. Let me see here. Let me pop this downstream a bit. Kick this back up to 42, let's say. And actually, I'm taking this out, because here's what's going to happen. You've got that blink blink, and then the king immediately does this. If I may speak, Your Highness. And I am not going to cut back to Tobias. I'm just going to go with this. So it's blink blink, and then he goes, if I may speak, Your Highness, by all means. Yep, and let's put some lip sync in there. I'm not gonna switch screens here, but I'm just gonna do a real quick check on the script. Yeah. Okay. So what we need here then, I'm gonna kill this layer, getting rid of it, gonna commit to it. No going back. Excuse me. And then we'll call this mouth. Alright, so it's an interesting dynamic here, because I suppose it's probably unusual for Tobias to speak up at all in the king's court. So this idea, the vibe would be go ahead and say whatever you have to say, but you know it better be important because you're slightly out of line here. That's kind of what's going on. But Tobias is a very loyal. Um, I guess you'd call him a servant. Okay, so yeah, so it's a little bit of a strange attitude. And by the way, I think I'm going to do a little patch on his. Um, I'm going to do a patch on his mustache. I feel like this right here. I want to grab. Just want to go like that. That's better. Okay. And we could actually go down like this. And now, because this patch is not a keyframe, if we bake this down, that patch that I just added, which is simply nothing more than this, will be added to this entire layer. So I hit Control E, and now every single one of these keyframes has that change baked into it. It's a pretty quick way to be able to fix things. And to a degree, the king, I know this might sound counterintuitive, but the king is actually kowtowing to Golik. Golik has been guiding the king since the king was a very young man. And the king is not a particularly strong individual. And so it's, again, it sounds a little counterintuitive, but the king actually wants Golik's approval and leadership, which sounds really stupid, but it's who he is. That's the reason he's a weak king. If I may speak, Your Highness, by all means. Yeah, see, that works. And it just kind of lets the audience maybe wonder where exactly are we going from here. And I'm going to say, by all means, Tobias. I'm going to add that. I'm going to add Tobias so that we really make it clear for the audience that we're shifting to Tobias. And so, in other words, at that moment, the audience might go, well, who the heck's Tobias? And obviously the... Okay. Okay. Yeah, big problem. That's interesting. I'm going to take both of these out. I'm a little weirded out here. I've got the paint layer selected. And so we have a glitch in that I made the quintessential mistake, which is in Krita. Easy to do. You just start drawing and then realize you were in the wrong layer. Happens all the time. I mean, it's like, it happens so much that it's kind of maddening, actually. Okay, so yeah, the problem is because this paint layer does not have a any keyframes, I inadvertently just baked that mouth shape into the background throughout the whole shot. So, okay. Now we're back on track. So, to buy. Okay. So when the king says to you, by all means, but he's actually got a little bit of a scowl on his face, you know, you want to be a little careful what you're about to say. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. By all means, Tobias. Yeah, that works. Okay, so this is 60 frames. Let's cut it into the show. Did we already determine that this was Okay, no, we did not. This is D. D. And now we can go back here. We'll cut it in. See if it's kind of flowing, which I think it will be. And if so, I would say we're done for the moment. D should be 60 frames at 8 frames a second. Boom. Properties. Now I said this whole thing takes about 3 seconds. Let's see how long it actually takes. Once we get into this part right here, if this was going to run its full length, something seems to be wrong here. That's 10 seconds. Let's see. Properties, disable resample. I guess that is pretty. I guess it is a little longer than I thought. Yeah, so it's important that Tobias's line comes in there. So it's like, blink, blink. If I may speak, Highness, by all means, Tobias. Okay, and then we'll cut to the close-up of Tobias, and we're in good shape. So I guess it was definitely more than 3 seconds, but that's okay because we actually saved ourselves. Instead of going, we eliminated cuts. I was going to go back and forth a couple times, and by just taking Tobias out. So I don't know if I finished my sentence a bit ago, but the idea here from a storytelling standpoint is at this point the audience really doesn't know exactly who Tobias is. So the question you got to ask yourself from an editorial or storytelling standpoint is it important that they do know? And the answer is no, it's not. If you plant a question in the audience's mind, it's only a problem if you don't answer the question. And obviously the very next shot is going to answer the question when we cut back to these two guys and have Tobias go ahead and ask his question. I think that we probably can reuse this shot. I don't think we need a close-up of Tobias. In fact, all we really need is for the prince to be looking at Tobias while he speaks. So with that, I think I'll call it a wrap. It's been an hour. And as you guys know, there will be more later.